We started a series last Sunday called Influence, and we're talking about how each one of us, regardless of age, regardless of experience or whatever, we all have influence. And we started out with a very simple definition of influence. Influence is a person who inspires or a person who guides the actions of others. And I think back, and maybe you can think of people in your life, the people who had the biggest influence on your life. People that shaped the way that you thought or your philosophy, or they shaped the way that you see things. They shaped even your faith. And people in our lives who had the biggest influence on life. Maybe it was a parent, maybe it was a sibling, maybe it was a boss or a coworker. It could have been a friend or a pastor or a teammate or whoever it was, but someone had influence in your life, and they kind of inspired you, or they guided the way that you act and the way that you see things. And someone who influenced in such a way that it's changed the direction of our life. And we can say, hey, we're better today. We're a better person because this person influenced our lives. And we all have them. We all have people who have influenced us in some way, some fashion. But the greatest influencer, and there's so many we could talk about in history who have shaped the nation that we live in, who have shaped the world that we live in. But I think of all the great influencers that we could talk about, that Jesus Christ has probably been the greatest influencer, hands down, of anyone, anywhere, of all time. The influence that he had, he took 12 men, and he said, hey, I'm gonna spend about 3 years with you guys. And he just did life with them, and he ate with them, he served with them, and he had these teachable moments with them. He just hung out with them and spent time with them. And as a result of his influence on these 12 men for about 3 years, we're gathered today. We're here today because 3 years, 12 men were influenced by one man, and it changed the world. And millions have been changed as a result of this one man's influence on 12 men. And you see, this wasn't accidental. This wasn't just a haphazard thing. It wasn't just something that he said, oh, that kind of worked well, spending time with 12 men and discipling them. It was quite the opposite. It was an exact plan. It was a precise plan of the Father in heaven that he said, I'm going to send my Son, and he is going to influence his followers, and he's going to influence these men, and they're going to become influencers, and from there it'll spread around the world. In fact, Jesus spoke about this. He spoke about his intention of how he wanted us to influence others and to be an influence in other people's lives. And we looked at this last week, but it's found in Matthew's Gospel, and it starts in chapter 5 and verse 13. He said, you're the salt of the earth. You're the salt of the earth. And he goes on, he said, you're the light of the world, and like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. He said, no one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. And then I love this last part here. He said, in the same way, let your light shine, or your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father. Jesus used two common elements to remind us of our influence and the influence that we have in the world. And the first one he said was salt. Salt, it was a common thing. Salt was used to add flavor to stuff. Salt is used to preserve stuff. And he said, you're the salt. You're the ones that will add the flavor. You're the ones that will preserve life on this planet. And the second one he said was light. He said, you're salt and you're light. And light exposes darkness. Light has healing power. Light causes things to grow. These two things influence whatever they're put on or near. These two things influence others. And that's why Jesus said these words. He said, in the same way, our calling as Christ followers is to influence the world around us. To influence the world around us, to be salt and to be light. He was very specific in where he wanted us to be influencers. He said, not just among the holy huddle, not just when you're around other salty people or other people bearing light. He said, that's not the time I want you to be salt and to be light. In other words, he said, you be light out into the world. You be light where where you are, where you happen to be at the moment. It may be in your home, it may be at work, it may be in a school, it may be in a restaurant, it may be in the ballpark or the bowling alley or gym or wherever you're at. It may be in a checkout line. But he said, you're to be the salt and you're to be the light in this world. You see, there's a whole world around us that's bland. There's a whole world around us that needs light. There's a whole world around us of people who are stumbling and looking for something. They're hungry, they're thirsty, and they're trying to find something. And Jesus instructs his followers. He said, you be the God flavors. You be the light in your world to those around you, those whom you do life with. I love the way the Message paraphrases this same passage we just read. He said, if I make you a light bearer, you don't think I'm going to hide you under a bucket, do you? I'm putting you on a light stand. I'm putting you on a light stand. I'm placing you in a strategic place. I'm placing you where there's some need for salt. I'm placing you where there's a need for light. And I'm going to tell you this one thing right here. If anything could revolutionize our lives, I think it's this, is to realize that God has put you on a lampstand. Your lampstand may be in a shop working. Your lampstand may be in a classroom. Your lampstand may be in your neighborhood. Your lampstand, wherever it's at. He said, I'm putting you there. I'm putting you in a place that you can shine. I'm putting you in a place that needs salt, that needs light. I'm putting you on a lampstand. He said, now that I've put you there on a hilltop, on a lampstand or a light stand, he said, shine. Now that you're there, shine. And I believe with all my heart, I believe we are not where we are by accident. You're not at your job by accident. You're not in your classroom by accident. You're not running with this circle of people by accident. I believe that God strategically places us where He wants us. You're not in your job. You're not in your neighborhood. You're not in your classroom. I believe God strategically places us where He needs salt and where He needs light. And throughout the Bible, God has done that over and over again. He's called men and women to influence their culture, to influence their generation by being salt and being light. He called for men and women who dare to be different and say, hey, I know it's dark out there. I know this place needs some salt. But they would dare to be different, and they would step out and they would shine. And they would influence the culture around them instead of being influenced by the culture around them. Jesus told many stories about this plan that He illustrated. And one of them was found simply in the story of the Good Samaritan in Luke's Gospel. He said a despised Samaritan came along. There was a man who had been beaten and robbed and left on the side of the road for dead. And the three people came by. Two were religious people. Two were holy people. Two were light bearers and salt bearers. Two were people that should have stopped. I mean, that should have been automatic to them. But they didn't. And the story picks up. He said, then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man who had been beaten and robbed and left for dead, he felt compassion for him. Going over to the Samaritan, he soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey, took him to an inn where he took care of him. The next day he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, take care of this man. Now, which of these three would you say is a neighbor to the man who was attacked by bandits? Jesus asked. The man replied, he said, the one who showed mercy. And then Jesus said, yes, now go and do the same thing. Several things going on in the story, but I believe Jesus strategically placed this Samaritan on the same road that He knew this man was going to be robbed on. And evidently, the Samaritan was a man of few words, because the only words that he even spoke were to the innkeeper when he gave him the coins, and he said, take care of whatever he needs. I'll settle the account when I come back. A man of few words. The man who had been beaten, who had been robbed, who had been left for dead. He didn't need a sermon from someone. He didn't need someone telling him, oh man, God loves you and God cares about you. And he didn't need all those words. He just needed somebody to do something for him, to bandage his wounds and get him to a place where he could get some help. It's interesting that all three of these people that passed this beaten up guy who had been robbed, all three of them saw the same thing. And perhaps the 2 religious people came by and said, hey, be praying for you, buddy. Sorry this happened to you. It's a shame, but we're going to be praying for you, and went on their way. Or they could have just looked at him and said, oh, poor soul, God bless you. and went on their way. But they did nothing to make a difference in the man's life. The Samaritan, it said he actually saw him, he went to him, he physically bandaged his wounds, took care of him. Now I ask you, if we were to talk to this guy who was beaten up, robbed, and left for dead on the side of the road, if we saw him a year later or 5 years later, 20 years later, and we said, hey bud, who are the people who's had the biggest influence on your life? I just have a feeling he would have said, I don't even know the guy's name. It was a Samaritan guy. But he stopped. And he saved me from death. He took care of my needs. That man had a big influence in my life. I think about the words of 1 John. Love this. He said, you show love for others by truly helping them and not by merely talking about it. You show love by doing something and not just saying something. I love this quote by St. Francis of Assisi. He said, preach Jesus at all times, and when necessary, use words. One of the greatest means of influence that we have is through acts of service. Simple acts of service. Our words have very little influence. In fact, words are cheap. You've heard that statement before. They're like a dime a dozen, but actions, on the other hand, will always cost us something and will require something of us. Some of the most influential, profound moments in my own life have come as a result of what someone did, some act of service that they did for me, not so much by what they said to me. I remember when we were growing up, I was about 15, 16 years old, and for the second time in my lifetime, our house burned to the ground. And I remember a guy that was a helper in our student ministry, that the night our house burned down, he was out there, he was, just trying to comfort and console us. The next morning, he took me and my brother down to one of the nice shops in downtown Panama City, and he said, you guys pick out some clothes. He said, I've got it. I'm covering it. I'll never forget that. He could have said, hey, poor you guys. I'm going to be praying for you guys, that everything works out okay. No, he did something. He did something, took us and got us some clothes. I think about so many other things in our life, just little things, little simple acts of service. And we come off our honeymoon, and we didn't even have a place to live. A place came open while we were on our honeymoon. And when we got back, people, family, and friends had moved us into a duplex that had come available. And like in the next day or so, 2 of the students cooked supper for us that night and brought it to the apartment. I'll never forget those simple acts of service. Simple things. I remember when our daughter was born, she was teething, and it was bad. It was bad at our house. I mean, she had been screaming and crying for, seemed like days on end, and my nerves were raw. Marie's nerves were raw, and we were just like, what do you do? Okay, great, we got this baby, now what do we do? And we had some good friends who lived down the street from us. They were out strolling their kids, 3 kids. They came by our house and heard our daughter out on the street. They came up to the door, knocked on the door. They said, hey, what's going on? And we told them, we don't know. And they said, give her to us, give it to us. They took her for the rest of the afternoon. I'll never forget a simple act of service. I remember cutting the grass last summer, smoldering heat. And I'm out there with a push mower doing the grass, and a neighbor walks over with a cold bottle of water. He says, hey, buddy, you need to drink this. I'll never forget that. A simple act of service. In fact, Jesus told another story of sheep and goats, and he said, one day, the sheep and goats, I'll separate them, the ones who followed me and the ones who didn't. And he said, when I separate them, he said, I'll say, come, you who are blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you fed me, and I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me into your home. I was naked, and you clothed me, and I was sick, and you cared for me, and I was in prison, and you visited me. And the righteous ones, they'll reply, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty, or give you something to drink, or a stranger and show you hospitality? Or when did we see you naked and clothe you? Or when did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will say, whenever you did one of these things to someone overlooked or ignored, that was me. You did it to me. A great way to influence others is through simple acts of service. That means anyone, anywhere, regardless of your age, your education, or your spiritual maturity, anyone can influence someone else. I'm excited this morning to have some guests again with us. They're not guests, they're actually family, but we're going to ask some of the students to come up. And where are you guys? I can't see. They're around here. Okay. Come on, guys. Run. Y'all are young. You can run. I can't. We had the students went this week and served. They did some of this, actual simple acts of service. Come on up, Kim, with him. They did simple acts of service. And just an amazing week from what I've heard, the pictures I've seen. And I just want to talk to them a minute about it. And there are going to be some pictures up here on the screens you can look at from their trip. So here we go. All right, y'all ready? We're going to zip through this thing. So tell me, this was the Serve Camp 2019. Do we know what we're looking at?
Can you go back? Sorry, Zoe. If you're number one, can you see the screen so y'all can...
Yeah, you got that? Who's going to tell me about Monday? You got it? Come right here. There you go.
So Monday was our first serve day for camp, and we went to a church in Mexico Beach who is basically being a Salvation Army, is what I like to put it. They are giving out toilet paper, paper towels, diapers, wipes, anything that is of necessity to people who lost everything in the hurricane. So they have clothes, food, basically everything. And the pastor and his wife, Pastor Eddie, are living at the church because, one, they lost their house in a fire like a few years ago. And so they are living at the church. And so the picture that's showing right now is they have magnet rollers. So you would take the magnet roller and roll it around the yard and pick up like any nails or staples or anything that has come off the roof or part of a house. And that is what can be destructive to cars that are driving through Mexico Beach, and it will cause a flat tire and people will have to get that repaired. And so that's one of the main damages still, is people having to have flat tires repaired. And so that can cost a lot of money. And so that's one way we helped. And me and some other girls, like one of our leaders, Lauren, Emily, Brooke, they have like this little tank of like blue crawfish or something like that. But anyway, his wife was in a wheelchair because she had some knee problems. She was in a brace, so she was in a wheelchair, and we helped her clean out the fish tank, which was pretty fun because, I mean, I've never seen anything like it. So I'm trying to remember what else we did.
So this was Monday. One of the things that makes me feel better now, because one of the pictures showed guys toting cases of toilet paper. Mm-hmm. I'm glad to know y'all were carrying them down there for them, and I was kind of worried about that picture, so I wasn't sure. So, okay, Emily, can you tell us a little bit about Tuesday, what you did?
Tuesday, we went to a church in Panama City. It's called Four Winds Church, and Pastor Garrett was pastor of that church, and his story is actually pretty cool. His story is my favorite. He was friends with the pastor of the church. It was a Baptist church before, I believe, and the pastor of that church got cancer, and his church just started to fail. He lost his congregation. It was pretty much only his family that stayed there and kept going there. And the pastor of that church was like, Garrett, I'll give you this church. I need you to bring new life into this church. But then the hurricane hit. Garrett lost his home, and the church, the fellowship hall, a tree fell through it. And by the time we got there, the tree was gone, but there's still some damage to the roof. So we got there, we planted flowers. That's what that picture is. We cleaned out the fellowship hall, and there was a lot of stuff in there. We actually took some of that stuff home and to help with the youth stuff. And we cleaned out a shed, cleaned up like a bunch of loose boards and stuff. And when we were done, we all did some fellowship, and we did worship, and all got up on the stage and sang together. And the whole time he kept saying he was so grateful just to have a clean church again.
Great. Awesome. Caleb, I understand y'all didn't go to a church on Wednesday, but y'all did something very interesting called Pay It Forward. Can you tell us, how did it make, I think y'all paid for some people's meals or for a meal for someone, is that right?
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
It made me feel good.
Cool. Did you see how the people responded?
They were like, oh, thank you, and stuff like that.
Cool. So anything else y'all did on Wednesday?
We watched a Pay It Forward movie, and we went down to the beach early that day, and we passed out water and bracelets to strangers, and then we paid for people's lunch.
Cool. Passed out water and bracelets. What did the bracelets say?
Like they were
Okay. No, can you tell me what that means? Or
this one means love, and I forgot what the white one means. Peace.
love and what?
Peace.
Peace. Cool. All right. Ben, you got Thursday.
Thursday we went to a church, that was almost completely destroyed. Like, they still had a bunch of the buildings standing, and they had, the foundation at least. But when we got there, they were already rebuilding most of the walls, and their fellowship hall was leaking. They had a bunch of food that they had to restock, and a bunch of rooms that the air conditioning was a little bit wonky. But what we did when we got there was we cleaned out the fellowship hall, got everything organized so they could spray the walls for mold control, and we organized the pantry, the kitchen, cleaned a few dishes, and cleaned a lot of the toys. We basically cleaned out their whole church and got everything set, and as we speak now, they're actually helping out several families that had their homes destroyed over the hurricane and fires and basically everything in between. So, yeah.
Cool. Let me ask you guys something. Did y'all have to go get a lot of schooling and training to do what y'all did? Was it pretty simple? I mean, I'm sure the work was hard, but pretty simple to do that. Cool. And you can't let these pictures get out to your parents if they're in here, because now they know you know how to do stuff, so yeah, it won't be good. But hey guys, thank you so much for serving. Wow, what a trip, and what an impact, what an influence you've had in a very devastated area. And God saw that. Every bottle of water that you gave out, God took notice of. And simple acts of service. Thank you for being an influence. Let's give them a hand. You guys can do that. Oh, one other thing. I asked her to bring this up. Show us this. This is what each student got that went on the trip. And I thought this was so neat. You want to tell them what it is?
So Miss Kim likes to give out tokens. And even in the back, we've gotten like little starfish and some cross. And so this week, throughout the week, we got different tokens of each serve day that we did. And so the first is this right here. It says, Serve Camp 2019. God gave you a fingerprint that no one else has, so you can leave an imprint that no one else can. go leave your mark. And it says that, and it has a picture of all of us before we left. And the second is, I think she has an enlarged picture of it, but it's like a little clothespin with a little chalkboard and a sticker on it. And in the movie Pay It Forward, the main character, Trevor, is assigned along with his class to try and change the world. I mean, not all of the world, but try. And he made this diagram. It started with him. Then it would go to another person and another person and another person. And they would each go out to 3 people. And so it would just start spreading and spreading and spreading. And so that is the diagram that is on this. And the last is a hammer with building his kingdom on it, because that's what we did all week. We served and we helped rebuild basically Panama City or Mexico Beach. So that's the 3
Those
tokens.
are so cool. I love the hammer. Build his kingdom. That's cool. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing. And y'all can go down.
All the students that are here, will you come up front, and all the leaders and helpers, Zach and Channing, all come up front real quick, real quick.
Got to run.
Yep, got to run. I don't know how much time we have left. This last picture right here is myself and our team right here. This could not have happened this week. All the meals that Zach and Channing, Mom, Grandma took care of us at the condo when we were tired from serving all day. We're so happy to get back to a warm lunch. And each one of these people right here, leaders, sacrificed their time, weeks. Some of them lost money to go. Zach and Channing brought work with them. So this was a team effort, and I want to commend them once again for helping myself and just putting this all together. And most of all, we want to thank the congregation and you guys, parents, and everyone in here that helped funded the way for the students to go. Every life that was touched and changed, you guys are a part of, every single one of you in this church. And thank you so much for letting us go down there and be the hands and feet of Jesus. These are world changers right here. Each one of these, each one of us can be world changers, and we do it one life at a time. Be that salt and light. And these kids right here and these students, we all seen it so relevant all week. Every little thing was a big thing. We made sure they knew that every little thing was a big thing. God was very pleased. We had such a great trip. And Pastor Chris, thank you most of all for letting myself and the team invest in these students, for trusting us to take them a week away from home and their parents and to allow them to be the hands and feet of Jesus. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you, Kim. I appreciate Kim and student ministry so much for their work, their labor of love, and their acts of service. What they've done. They actually did what Jesus asked us all to do, and He said, let your good deeds, let your acts of service shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise, not us, but praise our Heavenly Father. And you may say this morning, you say, well, hey, not as young as I used to be, or I'm not as young as they are. Or you may be here this morning and say, hey, I'm too young. Or you may say, I can't travel, I can't go off to these places and do these things. So how can I influence others? How can I make a difference? Every single one of us has a lampstand that God has placed us on. Every single one of us have a place, a strategic place in which God has placed us. And He said, all I want you to do is shine. All I want you to do is shine at work, shine in your department, shine with your associates, shine with your employees, shine at school, shine on your team, shine on your neighborhood, shine with your workout buddies. Wherever you're at, just let your light shine. He asks us to shine where He's placed us, and we do that through just simple acts of service. Simple acts of service that need doing all around us. Things that we can do regardless of our age, regardless of our spiritual maturity or our experience or our qualification, regardless of all that. Simple things that we can do to shine so that others will be directed toward our Father who is in heaven. We can shine and be salt through simply serving others in Jesus' name. Now imagine the impact and the influence that we could have if every single one of us today decided to walk out of this building in just a few minutes, determined to be salt and to be light wherever we are. You may be heading to a restaurant in just a minute. Wouldn't it be great if we showed up at the restaurant and we just shined and we were just salt? Or if we had to run by the store and we were checking out in the checkout line and we said, hey, we just want to be salt and light. That wherever we go when we leave this place, that we say, hey, we're going to make a difference. We're going to be an influence on others. In Jesus' name. Father,